Well, we're going to talk more about the war in Iran now and the potential goals of the US and Israel in all of this. To talk about this, I'm joined by Paymon Azmoudeh, who's a senior consultant with the risk and compliance practice at Forward Global, specialized in the Middle East and Africa. Thank you very much for being with us on France 24. It's been quite difficult to get reliable information out of Iran given an ongoing internet blackout. Can you tell us a little bit more about what we know about what's happening there?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the situation on the ground for people living in Tehran and other cities in Iran is extremely complicated. You basically have people living under martial law at the moment. So you have checkpoints all over the city, especially in Tehran. But you also have this constant stress and fear that obviously comes with being under bombardment. But then you also have a very kind of unique mix for a conflict scenario of actual things happening on the ground. So for example, last night, we were getting reports out of Tehran that there were Israeli drone strikes on individual IRGC checkpoints in the capital. And the reports that we were getting actually from kind of IRGC or Basij-aligned Telegram chats was that people were watching these drone strikes. People were going up on their rooftops basically and watching it like a sporting event. So you have this very surreal situation on the ground in Iran. And obviously a lot of people are very fearful. You have drone strikes in residential areas, you have bombings in residential areas, but at the same time, you have this population that's still recovering from the massacres that happened in January, over 30,000 people killed in the span of a weekend, and there's still very much this hope, even if it's now being tempered by a lot of concern, that this military intervention that a lot of people in Iran were asking for up until 2 weeks ago might still, be in some way the help that they were promised.
Well, let's talk about who is really in charge in Iran now. We know that the new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, has been named. Officials have confirmed that he's lightly wounded, but they say he's safe. In the meantime, we're hearing some statements from the president, not the new supreme leader. What do we make of all of this?
So first of all, when we're talking about the president, so Masoud Pezeshkian, I think it's important to understand, and the rest of the Iranian government has basically made clear that he's speaking for himself. So he came out last night and set some conditions basically for what he said Iran was expecting out of the end of the war. Basically, he said, we want our right to enrich uranium to be respected, we want reparations, and we want international guarantees that we won't be attacked again. And obviously none of those things are going to happen. Pezeshkian also said, as of a couple days ago, that he hasn't actually spoken to the new supreme leader. He has not been in touch with him. And I think that shows you just to what extent this person is isolated within the power structure. That said, Mojtaba, so the son of Ali Khamenei, the new supreme leader, he is apparently injured, but in safekeeping somewhere, but no one has seen him. So we haven't actually had a sign of life since the start of the war, when his father, his wife, and his child were killed, along with several other members of his family. So really, it's anyone's guess kind of in what condition he's in. And what we know is that the country is effectively, at this point, being run by two people. So it's Ali Larijani, who was one of his father's senior advisors, former president of the parliament, and Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, also parliament speaker, but an IRGC general who's kind of running the military side of the operation.
Right, and that's why we see, for example, Iran continuing to attack Gulf neighbors, even though Masoud Pezeshkian said, oh, we're sorry, we apologize, we don't want to do that.
And he was kind of immediately disowned by everyone else in a position of power. So you had the IRGC come out and say that we are not basically going to be acting in accordance with what this person is saying. You had other people on the interim leadership council with Pezeshkian who basically said that this is not the government strategy. And the reason for that is that this strategy was set by Ali Khamenei before the war, so before he was killed. The Iranian government has said it itself in those statements, kind of in reaction to Pezeshkian. We saw people saying this, that look, this strategy was put in place by the leader. And really, kind of from a military perspective, it's all the Islamic Republic can do, because they basically have to fight an asymmetric war. They're going up against the United States, so they're going up against the global military superpower, and Israel, which is the regional military superpower. There is no kind of match in terms of conventional means. So what they have to do is they have to go for soft targets. So soft targets are the Persian Gulf Emirates, because there are American military bases there, but there's also this very fragile economic ecosystem that's built on stability. So really, as soon as you have Iranian drones crashing into Dubai, crashing into Manama, crashing into Doha, that throws the entire economic model into question. And that's what they're banking on, because they think that will generate pressure on the US and on global energy markets.
Right, because, I mean, surely the Iranians know how important the economy is to US President Donald Trump. And I don't know how much they're thinking in the long game, but we know that the US has got midterm elections later this year.
And they're very aware of that.
The cost of fuel surely is going to be on voters' minds. That could sway Donald Trump perhaps to go one way or another with this?
I think it's already weighing on the decision making, and the Iranians know this. So when you have Abbas Araghchi, for example, the foreign minister, going on Fox News or going on NBC and trying to talk at the same time to Donald Trump, but also to American voters, they're basically making a midterm pitch. They're basically saying, look, gas prices are going to skyrocket. We've already seen kind of this really radical fluctuation in the price of crude oil. This is why they're talking about mining the Straits of Hormuz and are apparently starting to do so. The entire gambit here is to basically throw the global energy market, so the oil and gas market, into flux, to generate economic pressure in the US to get Trump to stop the war. That is essentially the entire Iranian strategy.
And in terms of Washington's strategy, I mean, we've seen so many contradictory statements, especially in the last 24 hours from the Trump administration. Does it have a strategy?
That's a very good question. So Donald Trump clearly thought that this war was going to be over in 2 or 3 days. He has said multiple times that, this is going to be like Venezuela, like someone like Del Cree, basically, to replace Nicolas Maduro. I'm going to find someone on the inside, and I'm going to make a deal with them, and I'm going to take out the guy at the top, and we're going to basically come to an arrangement with whoever replaces him. And I think that fundamentally comes from a misunderstanding of how the Iranian system works. It's quite possible that, it's a very corrupt establishment. There are probably, we know that there are a lot of people in the Iranian state that are on the Israeli payroll, for example, that are spying for the Mossad. Clearly, there are contacts there, but the idea that you would just kind of take out one person and the rest of the system would come along with you, it really shows kind of how poorly informed I think he is. And really, when we look at his statements, when we look at Pete Hegseth's statements, when we look at the issues that have come up operationally, for example, the airstrike on a girls' elementary school the first day in the opening salvo, I think that really that speaks to the lack of preparation and really the lack of competence that we see at the Pentagon right now.
So if regime change is the goal in Iran, what would that take? It's
a lot more complicated than I think anyone in Washington really banked on. I thought that Tel Aviv would have kind of a better idea, and I think they have more. I think the people advising Benjamin Netanyahu have a clearer idea and perspective of what's actually going on the ground in Tehran. One thing I'll say is that I think the issue from the US and Israeli perspective is that they thought this would be a short-term thing. They thought this is something that they could accomplish in days, if not weeks. Really, the Islamic Republic has been on a slow but really kind of consistent decline over the past decade. You've had these constant waves of mass protests. They've been getting bigger and bigger, especially the one that we saw in January. But this is a system that is very kind of deeply rooted, completely controls the economy, has hundreds of thousands of people at arms that it can call on to, for example, put down domestic demonstrations. That said, these airstrikes, this military campaign is weakening the system, is weakening the state. We can see that. But it's probably going to be a matter of months, if not a few years, before we actually see really concrete change.
Right.
Now, that said, just one last word on this. Taking out Ali Khamenei, if they thought that this is a personal dictatorship, that he goes, basically the whole thing crumbles, that was wrong. What is true is that Ali Khamenei was the glue holding together a lot of different factions within this regime and balancing them against each other. Now, with Moshtaba taking his place, apparently injured, and honestly, anyone's guess is as good as mine in terms of what state he's in, you might start seeing cracks, even if not during the conflict, then afterwards.
All right. Paymon Azmoudeh, thank you very much for your analysis on that.
Thank you very much.